In the previous ages, we did not have a real dichotomy of home versus temple. It wasn't very prominent. In the home, people may worship Shalagram Shila, and in the temple, then they would have the deities. Nowadays, particularly within ISKCON, we have huge congregations, and home deities become very, very prominent. Many people have these home deities. At the same time, Prabhupada encouraged temples, so we have temple deities as well. So the question will come, what's the difference between these two? Are they both Krishna, or is the home deity not Krishna, and one of the temple is Krishna? If they're both Krishna, then why would I have to go to the temple at all? I can just stay at my home and worship the deity there. And what are the standards? Do we have to apply the same standards in the temple that we apply in, do we apply those standards to the home also? Or do we have lesser standards? And we have another question, do I have to be initiated to worship in the home? Definitely in the temple, it is, there's an insistence on initiation and to follow the regular procedures. So do I have to follow all these procedures and rules and regulations in the home? So such questions arise, and we really have to understand the principles very carefully. So Archana has a scriptural definition. We can't just make up a new definition. Of course, we can modify according to convenience and circumstances the rules and regulations to some degree, but we have basic principles that must be followed in all types of deity worship that we perform. So, whether it is home worship or whether it is temple worship, there is a necessity of having an authorized form of the Lord who is installed properly and then worshipped at least to a minimum standard that is approved by the Pancharatra Shastra. So that should be in the home and in the temple. Now, of course, in temples, we will expect there will be higher standards, more rules and regulations, more offerings, etc., because there are more persons available for the worship. And in the home, basically, it is a husband and wife and maybe their children assisting in worshiping the deity. And they may be working, so they cannot follow the same schedule. But the basic principles have to be established. So as I said, there are some standards. That is initiation with mantra, following the procedures that are at least the minimum standards of Pancharatric procedures, plus the installation of the deity, and along with that, all the rules and regulations. A minimum standard has to be established. Also important, as I mentioned previously, is that that devotion has to be there. In other words, we're not establishing a deity just to show people something, whether it is a temple or in a house. In other words, we're not using it as a prestige symbol. I've got a deity, so that makes me more advanced, and we can show off to other people. It's not for that purpose. And similarly, a temple, we don't have a deity just to show that I've accomplished something, I'm a good manager, so I establish a deity, or I establish a deity so the people will come and give money, give donations, so that way we can maintain ourselves. So the essence of the deity worship is the devotion of the individuals involved, and they're expressing that devotion by worshiping the Lord. That becomes a sadhana for the devotees involved. In the temple, there's an added benefit we get from that because it is a public temple, therefore other people come, and if they see the devotion with which we're worshiping that deity, they become inspired to accept that worship also. They'll accept Krishna as the supreme deity, and they can make a decision, they'll get enthusiastic, make a decision to also worship the Lord, either chant his name or do some service for the Lord, and maybe later on they will even become serious, read scriptures, and take initiation. So it is a preaching method as well, the deity in the temple. The home deity, of course, usually doesn't serve that purpose. The purpose of the home deity is the regulation of the family, particularly the husband and the wife. So they have deities there so they can perform their bhakti in a favorable manner. So one is that they have to chant like everybody else. Chanting their rounds, etc. is the most important thing. This is the Yuga Dharma. Then they support that with the deity worship. Deity worship along with the chanting helps us understand why we're chanting, and it gives us some direct service. So that is the benefit for the couple worshiping the deity in the home. So this is the purpose of the worship. It is not for other extraneous purposes. So if these principles are understood, there should be no problem, and there should be no offense in the way that the individual in the home worships the deity. So definitely, yes, there will be differences in standard because the number of people involved in the worship is less, the time they can spend is less in the house, even probably the financial situation is not as good as in the temple, they have less money to spend, etc. But essential elements are there, basic standards, and behind that, the devotion and an understanding of what the purpose of that worship is, to please the Supreme Lord at all times. So if that is there, then it becomes successful. If it's not there, then it becomes useless. But the same thing goes for the temple. If we don't really understand the purpose of why we're doing all of this temple worship, then again, it becomes useless. So we have to understand the devotion behind it, as well as the external worship that we perform.